Good morning. Just in case we had some bits and pieces there that if you're familiar with us, you understood immensely, but there are some visitors with us this morning. Just so you know, we are doing what we call For One Another. It's an event that we're trying to share with our community of faith to say, how do we show the love of Jesus to a variety of people in a variety of ways? How do we as the community of faith respond to the needs in our community, and how do we just tell people, hey, we're here to help, we love people, we want to support people, we are for one another. And so each month we're picking out a nonprofit agency and working with them closely to see how we can help them and support them, and this month is Samaritan Works, and so the video was about Samaritan Works, because even though we are supporting them this month, some of us don't know what they do and how they do that. And so we wanted you to see that on the video. And again, next Sunday, one of their needs was that they got this basement full of stuff that has gotten damp. And they want to do something different with their basement and do a little bit better job of keeping it dry. And all that junk, you know how you get in a basement that gets junk? Even in this house over here, it's right here in the corner, has junk in it, and they need it out. And so I have offered to create a team that will do that. So unless you help me next Sunday, I'm that team. Just letting you know. Just share with you that that's what's happening. And we just need some muscle that'll pull some things up out of the basement. But you need to climb steps to be able to do that. And so I just want to encourage that muscle to join me next week. Hey, did you see that I was in the paper? Maybe you missed that. The ACLU, that was me. And I want to share that with you because some of you may have read that, and the article wasn't very flattering to the pastor who did that. I just want to say that. My concern is that you might think that your pastor went rogue and did something that was totally wrong, and that's why the school got in trouble. Maybe this will sound offensive. I don't want it to sound offensive. I simply got invited to pray, and I prayed. And that's what happened. And I do know the difference between being asked to do silent prayer and regular prayer, so I want you to know that too. And here's why I want to say that, is because sometimes pastors have a reputation of going off the reservation and doing something really goofy and dumb and getting people in trouble. And I just wanted you to know that that was not what I did, I don't think. Although we got in trouble with the ACLU because we had prayer, it was not because I went rogue. And in fact, I felt that I did that about as well as it could be. I said to the kids, I believe that the gun shooting and the darkness in people's soul is a spiritual issue. I believe that there's a piece of that belongs to spiritual issues. And I said to them, I prayed for you this morning, and I just want you to hear how I prayed for you this morning. And so I read for them the prayer that I gave to them that morning. I prayed for those who had been shot and the families that were trying to recover from that. I prayed for the fear that exists in communities when we're no longer sure that our children are safe. I prayed for the darkness that existed in some people's lives that for whatever reason they went down this road. And I prayed that God would bless our community, our children, keep us safe, and keep us focused on what is true and what is right. Interestingly, that got us in trouble, don't you think? And I think we have to own some of that. Because there are times in which the church has not handled itself well. And we have embarrassed ourselves. We have embarrassed ourselves by being judgmental. We have embarrassed ourselves by being critical. We have embarrassed ourselves by doing things where we're not wanted and not respected. And therefore, we've created a certain reputation in the communities that we live in that makes people fearful of us, angry with us, dissatisfied with us. And so we need to own some of that. When I was When I was growing up, I discovered that I have a relative, Colonel John Chivington, a Methodist pastor, that in 1863 went out and slaughtered and killed Cheyenne Aparo Indians at Sand Creek. It's called the Sand Creek Massacre or the Chivington Massacre. Dang. Several years ago, the United Methodist Church, because Colonel John was a Methodist circuit riding preacher, decided that they needed to offer an apology to the Native Americans for the massacre at Sand Creek. I was actually contacted that maybe they could put me on the stage as a representative of the Chivington family. And they could have a representative there who would actually apologize for the behavior of Colonel John Chivington. It didn't happen that way. They went ahead and apologized. It's official. The Methodists feel bad that we did that. I had nothing to do with it, right? It wasn't my fault. I didn't know the guy. But my name connected to his behavior. You may be the best church ever. Your behavior may be the best ever. But we belong to a family, don't we? We talked about this last week. We're a community. We're a family. We're called the Christians. And anytime a Christian does anything in the world, it reflects back on our family. And it may not be what we do, right? But we live with the reputation of what the family does. And when Uncle Bob goes off the reservation and does something strange, we have to live with that. And so I wanted you to know that I didn't go off the reservation. I didn't do something rogue. I didn't do something wrong. But isn't it interesting how fearful people are of Christians? Now, they need to own some of that. Because people who live in darkness are afraid of the light. Don't we agree with that? And so sometimes people are fearful of Christians and angry with Christians, and they don't know why. It's been interesting to me several times I've had conversation with people who are angry with the church, and they had no experience whatsoever with church people. And that's striking to me. But we need to own some of that reputation. And here's what I'd like to suggest to us is that the only thing that Jesus has given to us, the only thing that Jesus has given to us to counter a negative attitude in the community about the family is our ability to love. Isn't that true? We can't do anything else about the reputation people have about the church, their feelings about the church, the negative way. I mean, after all, I prayed for this community, and I offered my best prayer for this community. And I lifted it up to the greatest power that I know, the Almighty God. And I said, care for this community. And it still got us in trouble. So how do you counter that kind of reputation? The only way we can counter that kind of reputation is our ability to love. To love one another and to love people in the world. And we are challenged now as we enter into this series of sermons to be the community, to be the family of God. And the only reputation that we can take into the world that's going to change the world's opinion about us, the only reputation that we can gather together that will go into the world and make a difference in the world is what Jesus Christ has given to us. And what Jesus Christ has given to us is His love and the ability to proclaim that love through the unity and the love of the church together. What a challenge, huh? To so love one another that the world takes notice of it. To so love people that people take notice of it. To so be the community of faith. To so gather together and love and care for one another in such a way that people are astounded by our love for one another. And that's our hope. And that's the hope that Jesus has given to us. And so when we read here in Acts 4 that what the church did when they got together and the community of faith got together is that they shared everything they had. They were willing to give it away to the apostles, that the apostles might meet all the needs of the family, so that the Acts says that no one was in need in that family. We've got to take notice of that. Because that's how the church, the early church, responded to the grace of Jesus Christ. You see that? They were so amazed at the love of God that it changed how they felt about everything, including their possessions. They saw that in Jesus Christ they had received such great love and grace, that God himself had been so generous to them, that God had given them everything that they needed and wanted, that they decided that that was how they were going to treat one another. Which is our first principle of stewardship, isn't it? That everything we have belongs to. That was a community answer. The choir got it. Come on now. The first principle of stewardship is that everything belongs to God. Psalms 25:1. Everything is the Lord's. Oh. And so they were able to say to themselves, God has given us so much, that their hearts became overwhelmed with such generosity that they were just generous to one another. And the reputation, listen to this, the reputation that the early church had was a reputation of amazing generosity. Amazing generosity. Somewhere in our early relationship with my wife, we had a conversation, and Roxy, there was something that Roxy needed. And neither one of us, both of us remember the conversation, we just don't remember what was going on. But in the conversation, she needed something that belonged to me. You know how when you bring two families together, you got my stuff and you got your stuff. And we were trying to blend stuff. And she was saying, I need what you have. And I said to her, I don't know if you've caught on to this yet, but we're kind of in a relationship. And in a relationship, this is what I believe. I believe that everything I have belongs to you. And so therefore, if you need what I have, it belongs to you in the first place. Do you have relationships like that? Where your kids come home and they open the refrigerator and take anything they want? Do you dads have a garage where the kids come home and they raid your toolbox? You understand what it means to have an open generosity to the people that you love, because everything that you have belongs to them because they are a part of your family. You understand that. And that's how the early church understood it. And you know why they understood it? It's because that's how God teaches us to do relationships. Some of you might remember in the book of Luke, the 15th chapter, there's a story about this young man who goes off and he wastes everything that his dad had given him. And he's stuck in a far country, and finally he decides, you know what, I'm in an awful spot. But my dad still has riches, and if I went back to my dad, I could at least be a slave, I could be a servant for him, and I'd have more than what I've got out here on my own. And so he goes home, and his dad welcomes him and brings him in. It's called the prodigal son. And the illustration is that how generous God is to bring back those who have gone into a far country. But the story is for the older son of the brother that went away. He's mad. He's unhappy because the father has welcomed this younger son who has wasted everything. And the father makes this comment, and I want you to own this comment. He says, my son, everything I have belongs to you. Who's the Father? It's God. God is talking about His generosity to you and I. That everything God has is available to us. Everything belongs to God. And He says, everything I've got, I'm offering to you. I am as generous as I can possibly be. Every blessing I can give you, I would love to give you. I'm on your side. I'm on your team. I'm here to help you. I want to be generous to you. Ask and ye shall receive. Isn't that what we are taught? And the church heard that. And the church was so inspired by that, and they needed to respond to such generosity. And the only way they could respond to such generosity is to give away to those who were in need. And so everybody who was in need recognized that not only was God generous, but the hearts of God's people were generous as well. Now, we need to own that we don't always get this right. We're not always a loving people, and sometimes that's the reason we have the reputation that we have. Come on. Every once in a while, our selfish bone is what's driving us. Every once in a while, we don't care for one another right. Sometimes we don't care for the world right. And the church was no different. We see in 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter, where Paul is saying to them, I've got something to complain about. It says, when you get together and have a meal, where they had carry-in dinners. Carry-in dinners, that was funny. When they had their carry-in dinner, they used to call it the agape dinner. They'd set up separate tables. And over here was the table where the rich people came with all their food and their cakes and their wonderful breads. And they sat and they ate and sometimes actually got drunk. And over here was the poor table. And those folks went away hungry. And Paul's going, that's not the way the church works. And he's complaining about what they're doing. In James in the 2nd chapter, I believe, maybe the 3rd, he says, I've got something to complain about. He said, when rich people come into your sanctuary, you jump up and you give them the best seat and you pamper them and you make them feel welcome. But when poor people come in, you make them sit on the floor. So we didn't always get it right, did we? We didn't always understand what we were doing, and sometimes we failed. And sometimes we will. Well, what kind of reputation should we have? And what would be our response to the amazing grace of Jesus, who has said to us, everything I have belongs to you? How should we use such amazing resources? And how can we so love one another that we make a difference in the world? It's far too easy to dismiss this, isn't it? It's far too easy for us to go, well, that was them, this is now. They had stuff, we got different stuff. They live in a different time, we live in a different time. But is that really what God wanted us to say this morning? Or does God want us to say this morning, how can this community love one another like Jesus has asked us to love one another? Maybe one way is through generosity. For no one has a need. May God help us be the church that He is proud of.